Paul always suspected King Crab was more of a title than a name. And he wants to be the first human to bend the claw. Because one day, the crustaceans will rise, and only Paul will be spared. Foresight's a wonderful thing. Invest in innovation, including 3D printing, with Opto.
Welcome, Miriam. It's great to have you on the show. So how are things?
Good. I've had an exciting couple of weeks. My son just got married, so been being mother of the groom. So now back at it at AWS.
Oh, fantastic. No, that's great to hear. Well, I want to start with your background, and then we'll get into your current role and your thinking about the Gen AI industry. I was doing some research before the call. You've had a remarkable career spanning 25 years at Coca-Cola before moving to Amazon Web Services. So can you share what motivated your transition from Coca-Cola to AWS and how your experience at Coca-Cola has influenced your current role?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did have a wonderful career of over 25 years at Coke. And actually, prior to that, I was with Accenture, so doing mostly banking consulting. And that's why I joined Coke in finance. I got to work in finance. Then I was able to work in the marketing organization and then in IT. And I was able to retire from Coke as the corporate CIO. And the opportunity to work in high tech at AWS when cloud was still just evolving for companies and they were still asking, because I joined in 2017, companies were still asking, is cloud safe? Should we move to cloud? You don't hear that so much anymore, but I did consulting, I did big industry, big global CPG, and this has been a wonderful opportunity to be part of high tech. Obviously, AWS was a strategic partner for Coca-Cola, and that, of course, influenced the transition.
Yeah, of course. Well, to talk through what those kind of formative years through your Coca-Cola experience, you've built productive technology partnerships with companies like Adobe. I was reading on your profile, I think Facebook and Google as well. So talk to us about how those partnerships came about and what some of the key outcomes from those collaborations were as well.
Yeah, Coke is always working hard to win the consumer and win the customer every day. And to do that, at like any company that I work with now, you've got to maintain a culture that is innovative, that is looking around corners. And so partnerships with companies like Adobe, Facebook were companies that pushed our thinking, and they also collaborated with us on programs. We did a global content management solution. Obviously, Coke generates a lot of content, as you would imagine, and did that work with Adobe. We did hackathons with Facebook and really looked into consumer behavior together. So, those kind of companies always were just, pushing our thinking.
Yeah, really interesting. And throughout your career today, you've led on global enterprise technology strategy and digital transformation, which I think we'll get into later on. But perhaps you can just give us an overview of some of the most significant projects or initiatives you've led on. Perhaps there's one or two that particularly stick in the mind, and talk to us about the impact they had on the business as well.
Yeah, certainly. One of the biggest was working with our marketing organization at Coke and creating a consistent global strategy for digital marketing, which included brand websites, um, gaming, and then experience-based programs that we had for things like the Olympics and the World Cup. And so those programs, again, needed to always be innovative and forward thinking. But because it's Coca-Cola, it also needs to be consistently branded, and consumers need to be able to trust the sites and the promotions that they may engage in are being run appropriately. So security from a technology standpoint certainly was key. And so creating that strategy, but then working with AWS as a partner to drive to a consistent technology platform for our digital marketing properties was one of the largest initiatives. And getting the mindset for our executive team of cloud, and that cloud is secure and cloud is a place that enables our business to work more consistently. Coke, you might know, sells product in over 210 countries and has people in, over 40 major markets. That's Coke company. Obviously, the bottling companies have people in all of the local markets. And so that reach of a company and getting consistency and being able to share information quickly and effectively was a challenge. And so being able to enable that through technology, particularly through cloud, was certainly a key focus of my role as the corporate CIO.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, let's dig into cloud transformation then. As a AWS enterprise strategist and evangelist by this point, I suppose, as well. You talk to senior leaderships all the time about the benefits of cloud transformation. So perhaps you can just share some common themes from those conversations, any concerns from those conversations as well?
Yeah, what they're coming to us for, and I tend to talk to the executive leadership C-suite primarily because obviously at AWS we have wonderful engineers that can work with the builders in those companies. But as an ex uh, leader in a large enterprise, it's helpful, I think, to our customers for us to talk to them about the challenges that they are facing. Certainly, that alignment that I was just speaking of, that was always a challenge at Coke, is a challenge to other large multinationals. And what they're looking for is speed to market and time to value of investments that they are making. And that requires their organizations to be more agile and to make decisions more quickly.
Fantastic. And with that in mind, then I want to move us on to one of our main focuses for today, which is generative AI. I'm particularly interested in the section between Gen AI and cloud computing and kind of what that infrastructure and how necessary that infrastructure is for Gen AI. But let's start with the Gen AI competitive landscape and how we see that technology in its current life cycle. Where do you place generative AI at the moment? Is it in its infancy, adolescence, or are we even starting to see signs of maturity in the technology at the moment?
I think it's different depending on who you are and what the company is embracing. In 2023, certainly it was a year of learning and experimentation, lots of proof of concepts, lots of letting people, play and experiment. What I'm seeing now is companies actually working hard to build a clear strategy. Certainly, the board is asking for that. The senior leadership is asking for that because they want to see meaningful progress. And they have learned and seen in the news some security risk and challenges, and we tried to work very closely with that executive team first to educate. Right, digital fluency is so important because they need to know the questions to ask and the answers that they should be hearing. And so in this world where companies are leaning into generative AI, the training, education of the executive team, and then getting focused, picking a project that actually is impactful to their organization to begin with, so they can see how it works. If it's too outside of operations, it doesn't matter, and people aren't going to spend the time, and the day job is always going to take over. So finding a place to begin is something that we work very closely with customers to do.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, with that in mind, then, and I imagine work with a plethora of different businesses. But which industries do you think are best positioned or potentially better placed to be early adopters of this technology? Are there particular sectors where you're seeing the most traction and innovative use cases of this tech?
It's interesting because it's everybody. This is one of those technology transitions um, that's a bit unique, right? To other things where it was often regulated to IT to go solve. Generative AI is in the boardroom, as I just said, in the executive suite. They are the ones asking the questions, and therefore it's across all industries. We see healthcare and life sciences companies that are leaning in. Pfizer, for example, financial services, certainly. We do a lot of work with Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, as well as NASDAQ. You would have seen announcements of that at our big reInvent conference, and Intuit. Travel and hospitality is ripe, as you would imagine, uh, for generative AI. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, home of Coca-Cola, but also home of Delta Airlines. And so we have done some significant work with Delta Airlines leveraging these tools. I'm a sports fan, and so have spent some time with the PGA Tour. And that is a great example of a data-driven organization. If you're a golf fan at all, you can see the stats coming across. And if you go to a tournament, right, you have so much more information than those old boards that you were kind of tied to if you could find one on the course. I've also had the great opportunity to spend time with BMW. They actually have an innovation center up in Greenville, South Carolina, so not so far away from here. But they brought their entire leadership team out to meet with us in Seattle, and are doing some great work in automation within the plant and within the vehicle. Um, Consumer goods certainly has great opportunity. I've done some work with a couple of companies trying to reimagine and create a virtual shopping experience. What will that look like? And then the governments are in, right? You've got the governments leaning in. Our own government information uh, organizations of the US government, but as well other government entities that are asking for help. So I don't find it to be one industry that's charging forward and everybody else is waiting to see if they crash and burn. There was a little bit of that, right, when we moved to cloud. Like the banks and the insurance companies kind of held back, but that's not true in this space, at least not my experience.
Yeah, okay, that's really interesting. That's a nice comparison with cloud as well. I wonder then, in terms of companies' efforts to monetize this technology, are there any particular business models that stand out to you that you think a better place to leverage Gen AI's potential?
Yeah, and certainly, that is a conversation with the executive team. Um, and we talk to chief financial officers as well, and they want to know, we're putting money in, what are we getting back? And so some of the productivity plays that are good places to start, whether if you're a company that has a large call center, right, making those agents and that process more efficient and a better experience for your customers and consumers. We've seen a lot of companies lean into the call center space and the efficiencies there. Efficiencies in legal, in finance, places that have to pour through lots of documents, regulatory documents that these tools can run through much more quickly than a human can. When I was at Coke, certainly keeping track of food laws all over the world and making sure that we understood all the changes that might be happening. This type of tool helps, right? Dig through that data, recognize changes, and matches them to where there might be impact. So I do think there are productivity plays that companies are leaning into that are internal to their organization. But then, as I said too, companies are leaning out because they, like Coke, want to be innovative, want to be in the consumer's top of mind as a company that offers a better and a differentiated experience. And so we are working, and that's exciting work to do. But then the next day, I'm talking to companies about, developer productivity, for example. We had a long-established tool called Code Whisperer, but now have combined that with our work on Amazon Q into Q Developer, and the efficiencies from a code development certainly much better than when I started back in the day when we were in class handwriting out code. So the efficiencies in code development, and it makes everyone a developer now, right? The development language has become English. And I hate that for, non-English speaking people, but that is the current code development language. And I think that will evolve as well into other languages.
Yeah.
Open languages.
Yeah. I think a really exciting space, that web kind of development area and the efficiencies that can be gained there. And you mentioned a couple of points on the Amazon approach and the technologies and features you're building out with this technology. I want to come back to that. But before we do, I watched a recent panel event that you were on entitled GenAI is the Answer, What Was the Question? It really got to the heart of some of the issues that we're here to discuss today. So in your opinion, what are the key problems that GenAI is uniquely positioned to solve for businesses today?
Yeah, it was a good title for a panel, especially in 2023, because it was just, you had to say Gen AI like in every meeting. And I think, IT leaders were walking into the board and saying Gen AI, and they got to come to the board meeting. And so it did, there was a lot of buzz, and that's typical of new technologies. We go into big hype cycles, and then some reality starts hitting, like, oh, you actually do need a data strategy if you're going to create a differentiating generative AI application, right? And you need to know what's your objective? What is the outcome that you're trying to achieve at Amazon? We always talk about getting really clear on the business value proposition and then work backwards from that. Let's not start technology forward. Let's start business backwards and then find the right technologies to solve the problem, because otherwise you can get yourself into a world of hurt. And we've seen some things, when companies opened up ChatGPT, to their entire organization, you get data leaks. Of course you do, right? Nobody in IT would ever just drop in a tool and say, have at it. And so at Amazon, certainly our approach is security first with everything that we do with cloud and certainly with generative AI, but it's also choice. And that's just cultural at Amazon. You know that from your experience. I'm hoping you're a good Amazon shopper, but the breadth of choice is important to us. And so that's true in generative AI. We want people to have access to a wide variety of models because we do not believe there's going to be one model to rule the world. And businesses are unique and they're going to want to maintain their uniqueness. And so having your data secured and not sending your data out to train generally available models that then are leveraged by your competitors is certainly not approach that we would suggest customers to take. And so our approach of working with customers is start with security, start with enablement, start with choice, and start with a business problem that you're trying to solve. And let's work backwards to what is the right solution. But foundationally, data. You got to get a data strategy, which I kind of love because I was responsible for business intelligence at one point in my career at Coke when I was part of the marketing organization. And, my executives go, that whole conversation about data makes my hair hurt, because they had a gut feel about the business and what should be done, right, based on years of experience. And generative AI allows you to see things that you didn't know were opportunities or risk if you bring the right data together. And so the power, of this set of technologies, we're going to keep learning, right? All of us are going to keep learning. Somebody's going to do something else cool, and we're all going to go and dive in and see, right? Is that one real or is that a dead end? And it's going to be a great and exciting time. But, caution is needed. There are model hallucinations, right? There are biases in model. I already mentioned the English language, right, is the primary training language for all of these models. That creates some cultural biases right there. So, there is evolution that is required.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to dig into that point about data, and you talked about how companies want to retain some uniqueness to their business. I think it was on that same panel discussion. It was mentioned that data is going to be the difference maker for companies. Can you explain how businesses can leverage their data as a competitive advantage and even create a moat around their business?
Yeah, and some of that moat is your approach to the technology and how you do it, and securing your data and keeping it secure. And we offer a wide variety of solutions to do that. Even when you want to share data, we have clean rooms and approaches that allow you to use data without exposing your data. And certainly, that's critically important. And in healthcare, it's certainly critically important. I mentioned Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, and they're using Amazon Bedrock for investment analyst assistance. Well, we can't just publish that out that would be a problem. And so, having the right security and technical architecture kind of is job one. But, as far as a point of competitive advantage for companies, I do think, challenging, and we try hard to brainstorm and challenge. We have a new generative AI innovation center where we bring companies in and we work with them on what is the problem you're trying to solve, and going through approaches to solve that problem, and having those aha moments with the customer where they come up with something new and innovative for their organization. I mean, I mentioned the PGA Tour because, I like golf. Uh, they, the ability to know what's happening, right? The roar when you're at a golf tournament and there's this loud roar across the way, but you have no idea what happened there, right? Having the tour app have a roar button so you can see what the heck just happened across the way, right? Every shot live is a solution that the tour, so you can see, because it's, you've got golfers playing over a very large landscape. It's not like a basketball game where you can see all the players at one time and see what's happening. You got golfers on hole 1 and hole 18 all the way through. And so being able to connect that experience for the fans, similar work we've done with Formula One. I think some of the sports organizations, it's easier to see, and then companies can come back to their own organizations and say, what does that look like for us? Like Thomson Reuters, maybe not as exciting as Formula One, but obviously a very large business, very successful business, and they're using a Gen AI assistant for their tax professionals. Because again, lots of documents, lots of information to get through, and you've got to have the right answer because they have a solution that is a very trusted solution. And so that precision of insight, I think we're seeing, certainly, obviously true in healthcare and life sciences, and accelerating researcher productivity, but always with the human involved, right? We're not going to let the system go off and start making diagnoses all by itself or doing research all by itself, but there are ways to accelerate research that then can be checked and verified, so that, because medical content, if you've ever tried to go through some of that, my father's an attorney, legal content, it's just a lot of words. And so there's efficiencies and insights to be gained that certainly are going to be points of competitive advantage for those companies as they invest and figure this out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those sports examples are really interesting and help to make this a little less abstract. I was at a Gen
Yeah.
AI event a couple of weeks ago now, and it was one of the Formula One teams. I believe it was McLaren, and they were feeding data back to their driver in real time. So
Yep.
he had all the information available so he could make better decisions. But then obviously the next step they were exploring was, well, actually the Gen AI system can actually advise the driver on what to do next,
Right.
to handle the next turn, etc., etc., when to brake, which was mind blowing, really. But yeah, really, really interesting. I think that
100%. I've sat at the sidelines of those tracks with. I mean, you've got a bank of people on looking at screens, right? Looking at data that they're feeding not only to the driver but to the pit crew. What's the right time to pit? How are the tires? Right? We got sensors on everything. All this data coming back. Do we swap out the tires? It rained right at the beginning. I was at Silverstone, and it rained right at the beginning of the race, right? So the track's now wet. Now what? All of those, and those are a lot of money decisions too. But I 100% agree with you that real time, especially the speeds that those guys are going. And then you talk to companies like, I'm not sure it's fast enough for us. And I'm like, well, I, I think it's fast enough. It depends on how fast your company can actually act on the information, usually is the barrier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, with that in mind, then, I think again it was during the same panel event. One of your colleagues mentioned a saying that you have, I think, which is to think big, start small, scale quickly. Which is maybe,
Yep.
that's a motto that has applications beyond just generative AI. But if we focus on generative AI for now, explain how that applies to actually using Gen AI in a real business?
Yeah, I think you need to do that brainstorming, like I mentioned, we do at our Generative AI Innovation Center. Right? Let's look at the art of the possible. Right? Where could we go? What could we do? Like this company I was working with on a virtual shopping experience, we were thinking big, but then you got to find a place to start. Right? You've got to begin and take a step and really get your team to lean in, because it's the people in these organizations that know the company, know the objectives, live it every day. You've got to get them some experience in working in this different model, and then scale that if it works. Adjust. You got to, again, agile, iterative, all comes into play, and then adjust and scale and see what's different. Because if you move it from this market to that market, you're going to find out some differences. We certainly did at Coke. What would work in the US, didn't always work in Vietnam, right? You got scale issues. And so you've got to be able to break it apart. And, technology is in such a great place now where you can create smaller services and create a architecture that enables you to use the components that you need and put them together differently and scale quickly versus the monoliths that when I started my career, we were all into monoliths.
Yeah. Well, I think actually that's a perfect segue then to start talking about the Amazon approach. And this is where we'll end the podcast. I'm just keen to take all of this big picture kind of conversation that we've had and apply it to what AWS are actually doing in real time at the moment. How important is it for companies to have their cloud infrastructure in place before they can effectively adopt Gen AI technologies?
Yeah, it certainly is a question we get asked a lot. The people that already are in cloud are going to go faster. They just are, right? They've solved that problem. They can integrate data. Now, it certainly still need a data strategy, but they can move data across. And certainly at AWS, we are investing in a zero ETL future, which warms my heart because I spend a lot of time in meetings about extracting, transforming, and loading data into different places. And in cloud, and the technologies that we built from a storage and a data movement perspective enable that. And so those companies are ahead. What I'm seeing happening with companies that hadn't gotten a clear cloud strategy, and that those are fewer and fewer. When I joined AWS in 2017, as I said, the questions were still why cloud? Should we go to cloud? You don't hear that anymore. The companies that haven't made it, are still kind of hedging their bets some. But generative AI is like yanking them out of this debate to, oops, we're behind. And we need to enable our business through cloud, through a data strategy so that these tools work. And it's everybody. It's interesting. I was just here in Atlanta with a group of CEOs of farming co-ops and board members for Midwest farming co-ops. Ocean Spray is a co-op. And so that, farmers are in. When the farmers are in, some of these big multinationals that are still behind need to go, I might have missed, right, the train. I need to get on the train.
With that in mind, then, yeah, I think you referenced Bedrock earlier. I'm just keen to speak to specific products within the Amazon suite that actually facilitate this stuff. How is Bedrock facilitating the proliferation of Gen AI, and what unique advantages does it offer a business?
Yes, certainly, our starting point, as I think I mentioned with Bedrock, is security, right? And choice, giving you choice of models, choice of approaches that you will take. And we then, of course, have access via Bedrock to enable all the storage and all the data movement that I was just talking about. And then the ability to have all the compliance in place as part of AWS's approach is certainly core to those regulated industries, from HIPAA to GDPR in Europe. So making sure that we're hitting all of those for the regulated industries, but we will continue to evolve. We have guardrails for Bedrock that offers industry leading safety protection, and on top of the capabilities of the foundation models. And so you can block 80% of harmful content. We have just, with Titan, text embeddings in our V2 model. It's launching later this month. Gives customers, the ability to leverage these new capabilities, because storage and compute costs are a challenge and a problem that companies are foreseeing or experiencing if they've gotten to dive in. And so we are looking for ways to reduce those costs, reduce storage and compute costs, and certainly that's why our investments in things like Amazon Titan. So that suite of tools in the Amazon structure, where we start at the base layer of infrastructure and making sure that you're efficient at the base level, and then moving into the hard working tools like Bedrock that give you the model access and choice, and then up into the tool space at the top of this pyramid of solutions like Amazon Q, and the develop productivity we were talking about earlier. And so we are investing at all layers: infrastructure layer, at the model layer, and then at the tool layer.
As we so often do in the podcast, we end it by looking ahead. And I'm really interested to get your take on Amazon's longer term vision for generative AI as a technology, and how you see the business using it and how that might evolve over the next few years.
Yeah, at Amazon, we think the best way to learn is and to share with other customers is to share what customers are doing. And so maybe a couple of use cases to close us out. I former Coke colleague is CEO at Dentsu, and they are using the Amazon Titan image generator to preview and generate realistic studio quality images in large volumes using natural language prompts. And it's helped to generate compelling images for product placement and campaigns. And obviously, a very large firm working closely with us. Merck is using the Amazon Bedrock's new custom model import capability to bring pre-trained models tuned especially for biomedical data and terminology to its scientific platform and documentation. So, and then New York Stock Exchange using Bedrock's choice of foundation models and generative AI capabilities across multiple use cases, building intelligent document chatbots to analyze 20,000 pages of regulations. And, we talked about that earlier, pouring through those regulations quickly across all the US exchanges to provide answers about trading rules in an easy to understand language. Are just, a couple of examples of companies using Bedrock in different industries, right? To create efficiencies and productivity and precision for their organizations.
Yeah, and I think that's a really nice insight to end on. I think that just leaves me to say thank you very much for joining us on the podcast, Miriam. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, no, enjoyed meeting you, Hayden, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak with you today.